The camera shakes. Cracked earth crumbles under heavy boots in a valley that used to feed millions. Now, it is a graveyard of dust. But look at the encrypted radar feed glowing on the mobile command terminal. 200 miles away, just past the hostile border, the sky is being bled dry. A massive storm system is being artificially detonated, dropping its entire payload before it ever reaches this dying land. They are stealing the rain. The water flowing out of your kitchen tap is no longer dictated by the natural rhythms of the earth. It is controlled by military algorithms and squadrons of drones burning silver iodide flares thousands of miles away. If you do not understand who controls the sky right now, you are completely blind to the invisible siege slowly starving your local reservoirs. Ignorance of this atmospheric warfare is a direct, critical threat to your survival. We are taking you straight to the bleeding edge of this invisible conflict. We will expose the hidden physics of atmospheric rivers and track the rogue drones currently weaponizing the global water cycle. But we will also reveal the ultimate counteroffensive. A radical faction of visionary scientists is preparing to hijack this technology back, not to steal water, but to reprogram the entire global climate and end the concept of drought forever. We hit a rut, the heavy all-terrain vehicle slamming down hard against the baked mud of the riverbed. According to the geological survey maps clamped to the dashboard, we should be submerged under 20 feet of violently churning rapids. Instead, abrasive dust coats the windshield, choking the air intake. The field meteorologist beside me grips the roll bar, scanning a dead horizon where the vibrant green of life has been completely erased. The true horror of this drought is not found in the dirt. It is found by looking straight up. Through the stark, blindingly blue, empty sky, the meteorologist activates a massive augmented reality overlay on the tactical monitor. Suddenly, the heavens ignite with data. A swirling, violent, invisible river of water vapor is passing right over our heads. It is unimaginably thick with moisture, yet it aggressively refuses to drop a single life-saving drop. We are not looking at a few stray clouds. These are atmospheric rivers, massive, flowing corridors of concentrated water vapor dominating the lower atmosphere. Through the lens of the radar array, the scale is utterly staggering. We are tracking a continuous ribbon of vapor measuring over 500 miles wide and stretching 2,000 miles long, snaking across the hemisphere like a colossal, airborne serpent. It is a hydrologic juggernaut. The sheer physical weight of this invisible current defies human intuition. To understand the volume, look at the Mississippi River at maximum flood stage, an unstoppable force of nature tearing through the continent. Now multiply that sheer aquatic violence. A single, strong atmospheric river, like the one currently surging silently above our drone truck, can transport up to 15 times the volume of liquid water flowing through the mouth of the Mississippi. The meteorologist does not see a marvel of nature. Through their eyes, this data feed is a live broadcast of an ecological massacre. They punch in the telemetry coordinates, their gloved fingers leaving smudges on the glass. The readout is a mathematical paradox that should not exist in a functioning ecosystem. The localized relative humidity down here at ground level is currently hovering below 12%, triggering a catastrophic flash drought. We are standing on soil so dry it is turning to powder, right beneath a continuous atmospheric stream holding roughly 10 million tons of suspended moisture every single second. 10 million tons of salvation flying past at highway speeds, locked in a gaseous state. The crops are dying, the reservoirs are turning into toxic mud pits, and an ocean of fresh water is mocking us from the stratosphere. The system is broken, and it was broken on purpose. This extreme disparity between the flooded sky and the starving earth is not a natural climatic cycle. It is the footprint of a localized, highly coordinated theft. Someone upstream has already tapped into this specific atmospheric river, deploying chemical agents to strip its heavy precipitation hours before it crossed our coordinates. We are receiving the hollowed-out remnants of a storm, a ghostly slipstream robbed of its actual payload. The days of fighting over land borders and oil fields are rapidly coming to an end. The new front lines of global power are drawn 3 miles above the surface, shifting constantly with the barometric pressure. If a hostile superpower can control the atmospheric rivers, they do not need to send tanks across your border. They simply shut off your sky, weaponizing famine and forcing an entire civilization to its knees without firing a single bullet. We are witnessing a terrifying new epoch of human history, where the fundamental laws of nature have been successfully hacked. The meteorologist closes the tactical laptop, the glow fading from their exhausted face. We are left alone in the deafening, bone-dry wind, surrounded by the devastating evidence of a war that is completely invisible to the naked eye. The ultimate resource is no longer buried in the ground. It is floating just out of reach. This is the agonizing paradox of modern starvation amidst unimaginable plenty. Right now, there is significantly more fresh water floating 3 miles above your head than in the largest, deepest rivers on Earth. The water to save this valley, and thousands like it, is already here. But we are forced to watch it bleed away into the horizon because someone else, someone hidden in a bunker thousands of miles away, currently holds the key to the faucet. To find that hidden bunker, you have to leave the dead valleys behind and climb into the thin, freezing air of a covert, high-altitude launch facility. The roar of military-grade jet engines is vibrating right through my chest in the dead of night. We are looking through the harsh green glow of night vision lenses as a fleet of unmarked, fixed-wing unmanned aerial vehicles violently accelerates down a hidden runway. They are ascending directly into the teeth of a heavy, supercooled storm front. You probably grew up believing that a thunderstorm was an unpredictable act of God, a force of nature that humans could only hide from. You need to erase that comforting misconception right now. What we are witnessing on this freezing tarmac is the brutal reality of the 2020s. Rain is no longer a meteorological probability. It is a highly calculated, tactical military strike, executed with ruthless precision by autonomous drones and heavy chemical artillery. The sky above us is loaded with the stolen atmospheric river we tracked earlier. It is packed with moisture, but the physics of the atmosphere stubbornly refuse to let that water fall. The droplets are supercooled, meaning they remain in a liquid state even below the freezing point, lacking a structural anchor to crystallize and drop. This is where the geoengineering commanders step in, heavily armed and ready to force the atmosphere's hand through sheer chemical violence. Inside the internal payload bays of these climbing drones are hundreds of incendiary flares. They are not carrying explosives, but highly concentrated silver iodide aerosols. This specific chemical compound is the ultimate lockpick for the sky. The crystalline structure of silver iodide is practically indistinguishable from natural ice. When these flares burn inside the cloud, they trick the supercooled water vapor into freezing around them instantly, hijacking the storm. It is a forced, rapid-fire glaciation process happening on a massive scale. The drone cuts through the absolute darkness at the core of the storm, leaving a trail of burning aerosol behind it. Every single silver iodide particle acts as a microscopic seed, ripping water molecules out of their suspended state. The natural life cycle of a cloud, which should take hours or days to develop, is brutally compressed into a violent chain reaction lasting only a few terrifying minutes. You might be thinking this is a fringe experiment, a small-scale scientific test over a localized farming county. The reality is drastically more aggressive. We're looking at an industrialized shadow war being waged across entire continents. The footprint of this technology is staggering, effectively turning sovereign airspace into an unregulated battlefield where the primary objective is to drain the atmosphere of every single usable drop of moisture before it crosses a border. To understand the sheer magnitude of this theft, look at one recently uncovered hostile weather modification program. The operation was actively deployed over a continuous area of 350,000 square miles. They constructed a sweeping, automated network utilizing more than 10,000 ground-based combustion chambers. This sprawling terrestrial grid was perfectly synchronized with a localized fleet of 50 military-grade drones, all ordered to force early precipitation. 10,000 burning furnaces on the ground, and 50 predators in the sky, working together to literally milk the atmosphere dry. The logistics required to maintain this level of atmospheric control rival the deployment of a conventional invading army. They track the atmospheric rivers via satellite, calculate the exact vector of the moisture, and intercept the water long before it reaches the communities that desperately rely on it for their very survival. Back in the freezing air above us, the drone squadron hits its target altitude. Through the telemetry screens in the bunker, we watch the command being executed. The payload bays snap open. A barrage of burning flares drops directly into the absolute thickest, darkest layer of the supercooled clouds. A sudden blinding flash of lightning illuminates the sky, a direct, immediate reaction to the violent chemical shockwave tearing through the atmospheric pressure gradient. The telemetry data flashing across the monitors reveals the precise kill zone. At an altitude of 18,000 feet, where the ambient temperatures constantly hover around a brutal -4 degrees Fahrenheit, the chemical reaction achieves maximum lethality. We are watching the real-time data flow as a single, highly concentrated payload of active seeding material successfully triggers the sudden, catastrophic release of up to 2 billion gallons of targeted rainfall. 2 billion gallons of water, physically wrestled from the sky by a single autonomous machine in less time than it takes to drink your morning coffee. The water crashes down violently onto the militarized zone below, filling strategic reservoirs and sustaining heavily fortified agricultural hubs. It is an engineered deluge, a spectacular display of geopolitical dominance written in lightning and localized flooding, completely bypassing the natural hydrologic cycle of the planet. I am standing on the tarmac as the initial drops hit the concrete like heavy bullets. The air smells intensely of ozone and the sharp metallic tang of burning chemical accelerants. This is what the front lines of the 2020s look like. There are no trenches here, no artillery shells whistling overhead. The weapon of mass destruction is the sky itself, weaponized and commanded to drop its life-giving payload exclusively on the side of the border that controls the algorithms. When you witness this level of atmospheric hacking firsthand, the terrifying, zero-sum nature of the global water cycle becomes impossible to ignore. Every single drop of rain crashing down around me right now was fundamentally destined to fall somewhere else. The wind currents were carrying this exact moisture toward the cracked, dying valleys we stood in just hours ago. But those valleys will never see this storm, because the cloud has already been hollowed out and discarded. The drone engines whine as the fleet banks hard, returning to base to reload their payload bays for the next wave of atmospheric interception. They leave behind a fundamentally altered weather system. The massive Sky River continues its journey eastward, but its heavy, life-sustaining core has been surgically extracted. What continues over the horizon is merely a ghost of a storm. A dry, swirling mass of atmospheric pressure that offers nothing but false hope to the people downwind. The storm moves on, but the devastating mathematical reality of this artificial downpour remains absolute. The superpowers deploying these drones operate under a lethal, unspoken rule of modern geopolitics. If you violently force the sky to open up and water your own territory, you are actively condemning your neighbors to an engineered drought. We have to follow the dry wind to see the true cost of this stolen rain, because every successful strike creates a silent, expanding wasteland. The dry wind from that stolen storm carries us exactly 200 miles downwind, right into the heart of the resulting wasteland. Under my boots, the brittle remains of a shattered agricultural hub crunch like broken glass. The soil here is not just dry, it is completely devoid of life, baked into a hard, fractured mosaic by a relentless sun. We are standing ground zero of an invisible meteorological assassination. I wipe a layer of fine, choking dust off the screen of my ruggedized field tablet. The glowing tactical map tells a horrifying story. In stark, bright green, it displays the artificial rain event we just witnessed at the border. But radiating outward from that strike zone is a massive, creeping red polygon. It is swallowing the very farms we are standing on. A digital hemorrhage representing an engineered megadrought. This devastation exposes the most brutal, immutable law of the sky. You cannot simply create rain out of nothing. The atmosphere is not a magic fountain. It is a closed, thermodynamic ledger. If a hostile neighbor artificially forces a storm to drop its payload over their sovereign territory, they are legally and literally stealing that exact volume of water from yours. The sky is a zero-sum battlefield. To the field meteorologist tracking these systems, the atmosphere operates on a strict, unforgiving mass balance equation. Every action has an equal, devastating reaction. When those drones triggered a 20% artificial increase in localized precipitation upwind, they triggered an automatic, unavoidable deficit in downwind moisture transport. They balanced their books by violently emptying ours. We are losing the signal of natural weather entirely. What you are feeling when you walk through this dead valley is the physics of a weaponized rain shadow. The storm system that should have watered these crops arrived hollowed out, stripped of its latent heat and suspended liquid. The enemy extracted the lifeblood of the cloud, sending us nothing but a turbulent wall of dry, descending atmospheric pressure. The raw data flowing into this tablet confirms the scale of the attack. Advanced meteorological modeling proves that aggressive cloud seeding over that mountainous border region does not just cause a temporary dry spell. It structurally, fundamentally alters the regional climate. We are tracking a devastating reduction in annual rainfall across this neighboring nation by up to 35%. 35%. That is not a statistic. It is a death sentence for an entire civilization. It means reservoirs turn into toxic mud pits. It means the municipal taps in your home run completely dry, forcing millions into panicked migration. This is how you shatter an economy and break the will of a rival populace without ever declaring war or rolling a single armored vehicle across the contested border. The fallout is expanding faster than any natural climate cycle could ever dictate. The artificially induced rain shadow effect we are tracking is accelerating the process of desertification at an apocalyptic rate of roughly 40 square miles per week. Every 7 days, another massive chunk of arable land turns to sterile dust, weaponizing famine against a rival state with terrifying, calculated precision. A sudden violent gust of wind whips across the dead fields, stinging my face with sharp alkaline grit. It is hard to breathe out here. This wind should be heavy with the scent of approaching rain, a promise of relief. Instead, it is the exhaust of a mechanical theft, the arid breath of a hydrologic engine that has been deliberately stalled by military algorithms. We are choking on their geopolitical success. Look closely at the cracked earth at your feet. This is the ultimate crime scene of the 2020s, yet the perpetrators are sitting comfortably in a climate-controlled bunker thousands of miles away. They fired no bullets, dropped no explosives. They simply rewrote the atmospheric code, rerouting the atmospheric river just enough to ensure this ground never sees another drop of natural moisture. The genius of this modern warfare lies in its absolute deniability. How do you prove a sovereign nation stole a cloud? When the crops fail and the bread riots begin in the streets, the collapsing government will blame global warming or natural bad luck. But looking at the brutal geometry of this tactical map, the truth is undeniably clear. Nature has been completely removed from the geopolitical equation. We are witnessing the privatization of the water cycle itself. The wealthy and the heavily armed are actively hoarding the sky, building invisible fortresses of moisture while intentionally starving the communities left in their geographic wake. This is not a distant, theoretical dystopia. The front lines are right here, drawn in the dying roots of these ruined crops and the empty wells of the local farmers. But to fight back against this invisible siege, you have to catch the thieves in the act. You have to find the smoking gun in a crime scene that evaporates into thin air. As the red zone of the megadrought expands on my screen, a new directive comes through the encrypted channel. We are hunting for a highly specific, unnatural signature hidden deep inside the radar data, a forensic fingerprint of stolen rain. We leave the dead dirt of the front line and ascend into the cold, vibrating belly of a surveillance aircraft. I am strapped into the jump seat, flying parallel to the contested border. The cabin smells of ozone and stale coffee, humming with the relentless drone of the twin turboprops. Down below, the theft is absolute. But up here, at 30,000 feet, we are deploying a new kind of forensics to prove a crime that deliberately leaves no terrestrial crime scene. The perpetrators relied on the ultimate alibi. They thought they could hide their weaponized weather behind the chaotic, unpredictable violence of natural storms. When millions of gallons of water vanish from the atmospheric river, who do you arrest? You cannot put a cloud in handcuffs. But staring over the shoulder of the tactical radar operator, watching the green glow of the monitors in this claustrophobic cabin, I see the flaw in their perfect crime. They believed the sky was an untraceable void. They were wrong. We figured out how to fingerprint a stolen cloud. The operator taps a heavy reinforced screen, shifting the feed from standard tracking to a highly classified frequency. The monitor violently flickers, transforming the amorphous gray mass of the storm system into a sharp, multicolored grid. We are no longer just looking at the weather. We are actively interrogating the microscopic physics of the rain. The secret lies in the electromagnetic pulse. Standard meteorology bounces a single, horizontal radio wave off a storm to gauge its density. but we are hunting an invisible enemy. The operator engages the dual-polarization radar system. This array transmits both horizontal and vertical radio wave pulses simultaneously. It is a rapid, alternating crossfire of energy that penetrates the darkest core of the thunderhead. By firing these intersecting beams, the dual-polarization radar allows our analysts to determine the exact three-dimensional physical shape of the millions of particles suspended inside the storm system. We are not just seeing how much water is up there. We are mapping its structural anatomy in real time. The raw data streams across the secondary monitor in cascading columns of green digits. We are looking for the anomaly. To catch the thief, you have to understand what nature looks like when left alone. The operator isolates a massive, untouched thunderhead forming over the ocean. On the dual polarization feed, natural condensation processes produce uniform, predictable shapes. As the radar waves hit them, they register as smooth, flat blue ovals on our screen. Millions of liquid droplets, heavy with gravity, falling in perfect meteorological harmony. But then the operator pans the sensor array to the east, targeting the exact coordinates where the hostile drones deployed their payload. The flat blue ocean of natural rain instantly vanishes. Suddenly, jagged, blindingly bright red geometric anomalies bloom violently across the entire screen. The operator curses under his breath. The sheer density of the red clusters sets off a proximity alarm in the tight cabin. These blinding red flashes are the unmistakable signature of weaponized chemistry. We are looking at artificially introduced silver iodide. When the enemy drones injected their flares into the supercooled vapor, they forced the water to freeze instantly. But silver iodide does not create natural raindrops. It creates distinct, highly angular, hexagonal ice crystals. And those sharp geometric edges reflect our radar waves with a violently unnatural signature. The physical shape of the weapon betrays its origin. These artificial hexagonal crystals spin and fall differently than liquid water. As they tumble through the stratosphere, our vertical and horizontal radar pulses strike those jagged edges, creating a massive discrepancy in the return signal. The operator locks onto this chaotic feedback loop, isolating the exact frequency of the chemical theft. We have the fingerprint. The algorithms in the aircraft immediately begin tearing apart the differential reflectivity data. This is the crucial metric, the mathematical difference between the horizontal and the vertical radar returns. By analyzing this specific differential, investigators can strip away the natural background noise of the storm. The natural blue ovals fade into darkness, leaving only the blazing red trail of the synthetic ice. We are rewinding the life cycle of a stolen storm. The differential data allows the tactical team to pinpoint the exact moment down to the fraction of a second, and the precise three-dimensional location where the cloud underwent artificial glaciation. The radar paints a bright, glowing origin point right at the 18,000-foot mark. This is ground zero of the atmospheric strike, frozen in the telemetry. The operator hits a final command, and the software extrapolates the flight path based on the wind shear and the initial chemical bloom. We are effectively tracking a stealth weather attack back to its exact point of origin. A red line draws itself across the digital map, slicing through the storm, crossing the contested border, and terminating squarely over a classified military airfield, deep inside enemy territory. The deniability is completely shattered. We have the radar logs, the chemical fingerprints, and the exact coordinates of the perpetrators. They stole millions of tons of water, but they left a blazing electromagnetic trail right to their front door. The operator saves the encrypted file, a digital warrant for a crime against the sky. Now, the invisible war is out in the open, and retaliation is only a matter of time. Retaliation arrives not as a single strike, but as a cascading, algorithmic panic. Inside this humming, claustrophobic situation room, the blaring alarms signal that both sides have finally mastered radar forensics. They are no longer just tracking the theft, they are aggressively fighting back. We are watching a live escalation into mutually assured meteorological destruction, and the battlefield is directly above our heads. Look at the primary tactical monitor flashing red. Two rival nations, stripped of their plausible deniability, are now hurling competing fleets of seeding drones directly into the exact same atmospheric river. It is a desperate, zero-sum sprint to bleed the clouds dry before the enemy can. The airspace is saturated with autonomous fixed-wing aircraft, each one armed with heavy payloads of volatile, silver iodide flares. You might expect this synchronized aerial assault to produce a biblical deluge. But look at what happens when two superpowers try to steal the exact same cloud simultaneously. They do not get double the rain. Instead, the telemetry on the screen suddenly flatlines. The massive storm system just dies. By fighting over the exact same moisture corridor, they are fundamentally breaking the physics of the storm itself. Step away from the glowing radar screens and look at the physical sky outside the bunker. The heavy, dark thunderheads that promised salvation have mutated into an ominous, thick, gray smog. The air is heavy, choking, and completely devoid of falling water. This is not a natural cloud formation anymore. We are standing beneath an engineered atmospheric deadlock, a suspended ocean that refuses to drop a single drop of rain. The science behind this sudden, suffocating dry spell is a terrifying phenomenon known as atmospheric overseeding. Both militaries pumped maximum payloads of chemical aerosols into the exact same updraft. By injecting far too many artificial ice nuclei into the storm system, they fractured the available liquid water. The moisture is now forced to distribute itself across a staggering, unnatural number of microscopic particles. The mass balance equation of the sky has been pushed far past its breaking point. There is simply not enough ambient water vapor to support this sudden explosion of synthetic ice crystals. Instead of forming heavy, healthy raindrops, the moisture is stretched incredibly thin. The competing payloads have essentially pulverized the storm from the inside out, turning a dynamic weather system into a static, chemical haze. Because these millions of tiny ice crystals are competing for a limited water supply, they never gather the critical mass required to fall. They remain microscopically small and light, completely unable to grow heavy enough to overcome the natural upward draft forces of the atmosphere. The fundamental mechanism of precipitation completely stalls out. The rain cannot fall because the drops themselves are physically trapped in the sky. The radar operators are staring in absolute shock at a blank return signal. What was supposed to be a massive, life-saving rainstorm has been transformed into a suspended, non-precipitating fog bank. It is hovering right over the contested border, a dense, useless blanket of locked water. The weapons designed to force the sky to open up have acted as a chemical tourniquet, stopping the hydrologic cycle dead in its tracks. This is the devastating paradox of weather warfare playing out in real time. In their blind greed to steal the river in the sky, the warring factions have entirely neutralized the payload. The drones are still circling up there in the freezing smog, their flares burning empty, dropping more synthetic ice into a system that is already choking on it. The more they fight, the drier the earth below becomes. It is total gridlock. This tactical stalemate creates a massive geopolitical deadlock that physically locks up thousands of square miles of atmospheric moisture. The water is trapped in the stratosphere, indefinitely suspended as an artificial fog. Modeling algorithms in the Situation Room project the immediate fallout. Instead of gaining water, both nations will suffer a catastrophic decrease in localized regional rainfall by over 40%. A 40% drop in precipitation is not just a severe drought. It is a death sentence for the entire local ecosystem. By breaking the precipitation mechanics of this single massive storm, the superpowers are actively threatening a total, irreversible collapse of the regional hydrologic cycle. The rivers will run dry, the crops will turn to dust, and the very atmosphere will become a weapon of mutual, guaranteed starvation. The commanders in the room are finally realizing the suicidal nature of this conflict. You cannot conquer the climate with brute force. When you weaponize the fundamental systems of the Earth simply stops working. We are standing on the razor-thin brink of destroying the very weather system that keeps our species alive. This is the ultimate, terrifying cost of treating the sky as a limitless, exploitable battlefield. If this sheer scale of mutual destruction blows your mind too, hit the like button right now. We are watching humanity push the planetary water cycle to the absolute edge of collapse. Do you think we ever stood a chance of controlling this without breaking it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And to make sure you do not miss the radical solution to this global mystery, subscribe to the channel immediately. The silence in the command center is deafening. The deadlock above our heads proves that the old paradigm of theft is fundamentally broken. Zero-sum weather warfare is a dead end that will leave the entire globe in a permanent state of engineered famine. To survive, the sharpest minds in this room know they must completely abandon the concept of stealing rain. A radical paradigm shift is no longer optional. It is mandatory. The glowing tactical maps showing the stalled, dead storm are suddenly wiped from the primary screens. A new, vastly more complex planetary grid flickers to life in the dark room. We are about to witness a desperate pivot from localized, militarized destruction to a visionary, global operation. The smartest engineers on Earth are preparing to hijack this broken technology, not to fight over the sky, but to fundamentally rewrite it. Staring at the absolute failure of that overseeding deadlock, a new generation of scientists realized our survival requires a massive pivot. The only way forward is to stop fighting over invisible borders and start managing the entire atmosphere as a single, programmable machine. The dark, panic-filled bunkers are behind us. We are stepping into the light of a radical new paradigm. The transition hits you like a shockwave. We are now inside a sterile, brightly lit high-tech command center in Geneva. The roaring chaos of the front line is replaced by the humming silence of servers. Look at the primary screen dominating the room. The map has changed fundamentally. National borders have been entirely erased, replaced by a fluid, glowing network of atmospheric currents. Through the eyes of the geoengineering commanders standing at the console, the Earth is no longer a fractured battlefield. It is a unified patient. The commander acts with cold, calculated focus under immense planetary pressure. Every keystroke is driven by a utopian determination to fix what we broke. They are calmly inputting coordinates, preparing to execute a maneuver that defies belief. Here is the reality that rewrites everything you thought you knew about weather warfare. The very technology designed to starve rival nations is now being weaponized by rogue scientists to end the concept of drought forever. We are no longer trying to steal the river through brute force. We are learning how to actively, gently reroute the entire sky. You cannot conquer the climate by choking it with silver iodide. The commander knows that dropping chemicals into a storm only triggers localized chaos. True control requires treating the atmosphere as a fluid, dynamic puzzle. If we can understand the pressure gradients that push these invisible rivers across continents, we can learn to steer them without ever firing a single flare. To pull this off, the engineers had to abandon the violent, lower atmosphere where the old drone fleets operated. They needed a vantage point above the turbulence. A radical new protocol involves utilizing a network of autonomous, solar-powered high-altitude pseudo-satellites. These silent winged monoliths are deployed not into the storm, but far above it, waiting for commands. These ultra-lightweight platforms hover continuously at exactly 60,000 feet. Up here in the stratosphere, the air is thin and freezing, completely detached from the chaotic weather systems tearing across the surface below. From this godlike altitude, the pseudo-satellites do not drop payloads. They act as thermal architects, looking down at the massive moisture corridors. Instead of forcing immediate localized precipitation, these drones project concentrated energy downward. They create highly specific localized thermal updrafts. These invisible columns of rising heat act like invisible walls in the sky, subtly altering the massive pressure gradients that naturally steer the atmospheric rivers. We are physically bending the wind with temperature. This is the genius of the micro-nudging approach. We are no longer using the artillery logic of the past, trying to blast water out of a cloud. This is atmospheric judo. By applying a tiny amount of thermal leverage at exactly the right coordinate over the open ocean, the system fundamentally changes the trajectory of a storm before it ever makes landfall. The physics of this manipulation are mind-bending. The engineers use the thermal updrafts to shift the trajectory of these massive moisture corridors by a mere 2 to 3 degrees. Over the vast expanse of the Pacific, that geometric alteration seems practically microscopic. But as the river of vapor travels across the globe, that tiny divergence amplifies exponentially. A 2-degree shift over international waters translates into a precise, targeted delivery system. That slight nudge changes the storm's final destination by hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles inland. The commander watches the glowing telemetry confirm the course correction. We are successfully steering billions of tons of suspended water with nothing more than a phantom touch. Now, expand your vision to the planetary scale. One drone nudging one river is a scientific marvel, but it does not save the world. The true breakthrough happens when you coordinate these fleets globally. The screens in Geneva show thousands of these pseudo-satellites linking up, sharing real-time atmospheric data, and executing a synchronized planetary dance of thermal adjustments. By uniting this global swarm, engineers can hypothetically orchestrate a massive redistribution of the water cycle. They spot a brutal, supercharged atmospheric river barreling toward a vulnerable coastal megacity. Instead of letting it hit, they deploy the network. They gently bend the corridor, redirecting the excessive moisture away from catastrophic, deadly flood zones. The commander tracks the redirected river as it glides safely past the flooded coast. The moisture is seamlessly guided directly into an arid, burning desert region thousands of miles away that has not seen rain in a decade. They are effectively redistributing planetary water without depleting the source. Nobody is robbed. The rain shadow effect is completely neutralized. We are witnessing the first active terraforming of Earth. The shift from a zero-sum war to a cooperative, programmable hydrologic grid is the only path to survival. But steering what already exists is only half the battle. If we truly want to break the cycle of scarcity, we must learn to conjure rain from a cloudless sky, taking us from atmospheric managers to absolute creators. I'm standing on the deck of a heavily modified cargo ship, plunging through the dark, choppy waters of the Pacific. Cold saltwater sprays across my face. Rerouting existing sky rivers was only the first step in this global war for survival. The ultimate visionary breakthrough required something impossible: the ability to generate entirely new moisture where absolutely none existed. Moving massive walls of water from one continent to another is a logistical triumph. But look at the sky above this vessel with me. It is a completely empty, star-filled void. Not a single cloud in sight. What if you could manufacture a massive, torrential rainstorm out of this clear blue sky, using nothing but sheer energy and raw physics? A deafening, mechanical hum violently vibrates through the steel deck beneath my boots. Suddenly, a battery of high-energy lasers erupts from the bow. Intense, pulsing blue beams slice directly upward, piercing the black stratosphere. The air around us instantly crackles, filling your lungs with the sharp, metallic stench of burning ozone. We are witnessing laser-induced condensation deployed on the absolute front lines of tomorrow. These are not simple light beams used for tracking. They are ultra-short, high-energy terawatt lasers firing relentlessly into the lower atmosphere. The sheer, concentrated power is enough to violently strip electrons straight off of ambient oxygen and nitrogen molecules. It feels like standing inside the barrel of a planetary particle accelerator. We are literally ripping the fundamental building blocks of the air apart in real time. This is no longer just meteorology or weather management. This is brute force quantum engineering applied to the open ocean sky. We are treating the empty atmosphere like a blank, programmable canvas. By violently tearing those electrons away, the lasers carve out highly conductive plasma channels, perfectly suspended miles above our heads. This localized, extreme energy injection triggers an immediate, aggressive chemical chain reaction. It rapidly synthesizes heavy concentrations of nitric acid and ozone straight out of the invisible atmospheric gases. Those newly forged chemical compounds do not just disperse into the high-altitude winds. They immediately act as highly efficient, microscopic condensation nuclei. We are essentially firing millions of invisible chemical magnets directly into the air. They instantly force the ambient, scattered humidity to bind together into heavy, liquid water droplets. Keep your eyes on the dark, empty expanse directly above the glowing laser battery. You can see a faint, luminous haze beginning to form where there was nothing but dead space seconds ago. It thickens. It rapidly swirls into a dense vortex. Right before your eyes, a physical, heavy cloud system is literally materializing out of thin air, born entirely from light. This is the pure, unfiltered adrenaline of planetary creation. There are no silver iodide flares here. We are no longer hijacking storm fronts from a rival nation and triggering mutually assured destruction. We are giving birth to a localized, engineered weather system. We have transitioned from a species that cowers from the weather to a species that codes it. For thousands of years, human civilization prayed for rain. Then we fought brutal, invisible global wars to steal it from each other. Tonight, on this freezing, wind-battered deck in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, everything permanently changes. We are writing the source code for a monsoon and compiling it in real time right above our heads. The operational math behind this artificial genesis is absolutely staggering. Under optimal atmospheric conditions, running this single ship-based laser array continuously for just 72 hours yields terrifyingly beautiful results. We're not just generating a little coastal fog. We are constructing a monolithic, towering reservoir in the open sky. That continuously generated cloud system rapidly becomes a heavy, saturated tactical payload. It locks onto the planetary pressure gradients we already know how to manipulate. We are building a custom storm born over the ocean, specifically targeted at a dying coastal city, capable of delivering over 50 million gallons of pure, fresh water. Think about the raw geopolitical scale of that intervention. Over 50 million gallons of water created entirely on demand, delivered exactly where it is needed most. We achieve this massive influx of life without draining a single terrestrial lake or stealing from a neighboring border. We are completely bypassing the natural, failing hydrologic cycle. The first heavy drops of artificial rain begin to smash against the steel deck, cold and undeniable. We have conquered the ultimate threshold of human survival. We've engineered the absolute miracle of water from pure light. We stand on the precipice of a utopian era, holding the power of gods in the palm of our hands. But as this newly minted storm drifts toward the mainland, carrying the salvation of millions, a new reality sets in. We hold the ultimate weapon of life. The technology works flawlessly. Now, we face the final monumental challenge, convincing a fractured, warring world to lay down their arms and share the blueprint of our newly terraformed skies. The storm we built off the coast did not become another weapon. Staring into the abyss of a mutually assured meteorological destruction, the warring factions finally blinked. I am standing in the exact same dry riverbed we drove through at the beginning of this journey. Only now, the dust is gone. Clear, cold water is rushing violently past my boots. The silence of the drought has been broken. We survived the siege, and the sky above us is no longer a battlefield. The transition from zero-sum theft to global cooperation was not born of sudden political goodwill. It was born of mathematical necessity. We realized that breaking the hydrologic cycle is a localized suicide, but fixing it requires a planetary operating system. To manage a unified global atmospheric water protocol, we now process over 50 petabytes of meteorological data every single day. The sky is no longer a chaotic expanse. It is a synchronized, programmable grid. We handed the reins of the atmosphere to decentralized quantum algorithms. These systems do not see national borders or historical grievances. They calculate the maximum thermodynamic efficiency of the entire planet. Projections indicate that this fully integrated system is already scaling to distribute over 4.2 trillion gallons of fresh water annually. We are pumping life directly into former desertification zones, rewriting the geography of survival. Think about the sheer scale of the shift we have witnessed. We started this investigation tracking rogue drones stealing moisture in the dead of night, weaponizing silver iodide to bleed clouds dry over sovereign soil. We documented the victims of engineered rain shadows, populations deliberately starved of water. We built forensics to catch thieves who thought they could hide behind the natural randomness of the weather. We were preparing for a century of water wars. We pushed the physics of the atmosphere to the absolute breaking point. When rival nations attempted to drain the same atmospheric river, we choked the sky with artificial ice, creating a dead, non-precipitating fog. We looked at that paralyzed, smog-filled sky and finally understood the existential threat. The atmosphere is a closed-loop system. If you break the engine that drives the rain, you do not just starve your enemy, you condemn your own children to the dust. That terrifying deadlock was the catalyst for our evolution. We stopped fighting over the scraps of a dying climate and decided to terraform our own world. We deployed solar-powered satellites at 60,000 feet to gently steer the atmospheric rivers, nudging pressure gradients by a few degrees. We moved excess water away from catastrophic flood zones and delivered it safely to burning deserts. We learned to share the moisture instead of hoarding it behind invisible walls. And when rerouting was not enough, we unleashed the terawatt lasers. We learned to strip electrons from the air, forging plasma channels that birth clouds out of a clear blue sky. We claimed the power of Genesis. We stood on the brink of a conflict that would have torn civilization apart, fighting over the last dying reservoirs. Instead, we chose to hack the heavens. The same technology that was designed to starve nations is now the very architecture of our salvation. I have spent years on the front lines of this invisible war, watching crops turn to ash and rivers turn to cracked highways. I have seen the darkest impulses of human nature codified into weather manipulation algorithms. But standing here, listening to the roar of this restored river, the narrative feels fundamentally different. The storm above me is massive, dark, and heavy with rain, but it feels entirely peaceful. It is a managed miracle, and it is holding the line. The core question of our era was never about who owned the rain. It was about whether we possessed the collective intelligence to manage a resource that refuses to obey lines drawn on a map. By mastering the complex physics of atmospheric rivers, we forcibly shifted our destiny. We are no longer victims huddled beneath a chaotic sky, waiting for nature to decide our fate. We are the active architects of the atmosphere, coding the planetary climate for mutual survival. This is the true legacy of our generation. We did not just solve the drought. We proved that humanity can outgrow its most destructive instincts when faced with absolute annihilation. The weaponization of the weather was the ultimate test of our species. We could have used our mastery of physics to turn the Earth into a barren, hyper-militarized wasteland. Instead, we built a global hydrologic cooperative. We elevated our consciousness to match the scale of the machinery. The infrastructure of the sky is now open source, but the responsibility to protect it belongs to all of us. If this investigation has fundamentally changed how you look up at the clouds, hit the subscribe button to continue the research with us. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you believe this global atmospheric truce will hold, or is it just a temporary ceasefire? We are reading the data, but we need your perspective to truly understand the geopolitical fallout. As the sun sets over this rushing water, the radar screens in Geneva are glowing with the steady, synchronized pulse of 1 million airborne data points. The atmospheric rivers are flowing exactly where they are needed, guided by the invisible hand of a united civilization. The war for the clouds is officially over, replaced by the quiet, relentless hum of planetary maintenance. We have finally learned how to live on Earth without tearing it apart to quench our thirst. The sky is no longer a chaotic wilderness to fear, nor a tactical high ground to be conquered. It is a shared sanctuary, a testament to what we can achieve when we stop fighting the laws of physics and start writing them together. Look up. The rain falling on your face tonight is a promise of a future we chose to build. This is the end of the zero-sum world. I am stepping out of the storm. Signing off.